Hello and welcome. Yossi Media, in partnership with the American Heart Association, is proud to present Check In and Check Up for Your Health with a discussion on stress and heart health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's time to raise awareness of and reduce the stigma surrounding behavioral health issues, as well as highlighting the ways mental illness can affect all of us. Anxiety, stress, and depression can have a negative impact on your physical health and may even increase your risk for heart disease and stroke. Even before the pandemic, millions of Americans were experiencing stress, trauma, anxiety, and heightened levels of depression. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated those conditions, creating an unprecedented mental health crisis across our country. Communities of color, frontline workers, and healthcare workers have been disproportionately impacted, and the rate of depression across the country has more than tripled compared to rates in 2019. Despite these disturbing trends, less than half of Americans who struggle with mental illness receive the treatment they need, even fewer within Black and brown communities. Joining Sybil in today's discussion is trailblazing cardiologist and president of the American Heart Association, the very impressive Dr. Michelle Albert, and your favorite comedian, the hilarious Rodney Perry. This Mental Health Month, challenge yourself to examine your world and how it can affect your overall health. The American Heart Association has the tips, tools, and resources to help you manage stress at heart.org/stress. And now, here is Sybil.
A stressed out Sybil Wilkes. Hello, everyone, and welcome. So I guess it's a good thing we're doing this show on heart health and managing our stress. I am so glad to be back with you all and to welcome you into this very important conversation with some terrific people. You know them, you love them, and if you've watched our show, you have met Dr. Michelle Albert, the current president and soon to be former president of the American Heart Association. Boy, that year went by quickly, didn't it? And first up is our guest. He is the hilarious, that's right, Rodney Perry. He is our comedian extraordinaire tonight. Rodney, it seems like we just saw each other, passing each other across the bars and pool decks and what have you. How are you?
This is the crazy part. So we were on the Tom Joyner cruise. I just came from the Lido deck in my house. I'm up there looking for the food at the Windjammer. I don't know why nobody's cooking for me.
and getting that little tiny omelet made for you.
I need the tiny omelet. I need that salad. I stood in line for a salad for an hour.
How crazy is that? We had quite a time. Rodney, this is a perfect time to bring in a trailblazer, if you will. This is Dr. Michelle Albert. She is, as I said, the trailblazing president of the American Heart Association. Dr. Albert, meet Rodney Perry, and anything that you may have heard that sounds familiar.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hi, Doc.
Thank you for having me.
So, Doctor, we are just coming to the end of Stress Awareness Month. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. Now, Rodney, you did not have a connection between stress and your stroke, as you mentioned to us.
I mean, not that I know of, but as we began to talk about this conversation, absolutely. I mean, I was traveling every week. I was up and down in airplanes. I got to take care of my family. Of course I had stress. I don't know if stress was a core cause for me because I was dealing with hypertension as well. But all those stress factors play into each other. So I'm sure the doc will educate us a little more, but I'm sure I was stressed.
Yeah. And Rodney, I'm glad you're making that correlation between stress and, heart and brain health, because we know, and we've known this for a long time, that whether causally and no more with data, that stress is linked to cardiovascular disease and stroke. And we know that, when we're stressed, that our body goes into a flight or fright response, or, hormone levels get dysregulated, or epinephrine levels get increased, all things that then drive us. And so they're tightly correlated. Stress is bad. And I heard you guys talking about the cruise prior to this, so I'm glad you were able to go on the cruise, because that's a stress buster in itself, to be able to really interact with people, laugh, have a good time, maybe even dance. have a good time.
See Stevie
those
Wonder
are all,
perform. Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
So we know that they are really, and we also know that depression, anxiety, are all also associated with heart disease and stroke. And we know that depression and heart disease are also tied into stress. And in the general public, things like finances, work stress, family work conflict are some of the greatest causes of stress for all of us.
Wow.
I got to tell you, I sleep the best when I'm on vacation, and it doesn't matter how comfortable or uncomfortable the bed is. There's something about being on a ship, and I was looking for the motion of the ocean. Those things are just so smooth. But
Right.
it's the noise, the almost like white noise of the water as you're floating along, and I slept better. And then come back to reality, and I'm back to my old sleeping patterns and what have you. And today I had a really stressed out day, and I had to do some woo-sighing, doctor, because I was just running and ripping and running because I've got to get this show done and then fly to another city and all of this stuff. And I was like, I cannot, I just have to just take a moment and breathe. Even when I was supposed to be relaxing on the table, I couldn't get relaxed. How do we confront that or help ourselves with that?
Right. And Sybil, where you're getting at there is, sort of how do we as an average person, sort of deal with stress on a minute-to-minute basis, as well as, sort of during the course of our week. And, one of the things is actually getting appropriate amounts of sleep, right? So we should make sure that we get between 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. Because it does help to sort of deal with stress. And honestly, in minority communities, especially in African American communities, we tend to not get as much sleep for a whole host of reasons. And that sort of helps to sort of increase the cycle of the impact of stress on our heart and brain health. Right. So the other thing that's really important to do is meditation, right? And creating some time and space where we, sort of blot out all the fuss that goes on in the rest of our lives, and that may be meditating just for a couple of minutes to focus on, your breathing, deep breathing in and out, and paying attention to how your diaphragm or how
and how our diaphragm and how the rest of our body is responding and into our breathing in and out.
Right.
That's tough.
And I think the important thing there is that a lot of times when we try to do that, you may get intrusions from, sort of various thought processes that might be happening. And that's okay, especially when you're starting to do, sort of these deep breathing and meditation, because the goal is to actually know that that's happening and how you recenter yourself to that not happening over time.
Right.
Other things that we can do would be increasing the amount of exercise we get. And, we say you want to make sure you get at least half an hour of some form of physical activity, and that can just be walking with a friend every day to ensure that because that decreases our likelihood of heart disease, but also improves your stress levels.
Right.
Wow.
So ensures that you are connecting with other people. So another stress buster activity is making sure that you connect with family and friends in order to make sure that you can decompress and share your experiences. The other thing would be making sure that if you have like a pet, for example.
Yeah, I've heard that is a good thing to have as a stress reliever.
You're having a pet and interacting with your pet can help decrease your stress levels. And we know that it can actually, for example, help decrease your blood pressure. And the ways that it helps doing that also is keeping you accountable to going walking that pet.
Walking the pet. I didn't know where you was going with that.
Well, it helps to decrease your stress in general because you're playing with your pet, you're interacting with your pet, but also you have to walk that dog, probably twice a day. So those are.
That's one of my moves. Walk the dog. You know what? Go ahead, Dr. May.
Rodney, does any of this sound familiar to you as perhaps if you can go back the 6 years as you were approaching the stroke and you were feeling the symptoms that were described to you? Were you undergoing, and as you said, working every week, providing for your large family and all of that? Do these things sound familiar to you in terms
I mean, at the end of the day, you can never hurt yourself by exercising. And I think that's what the doc is saying. And how about this? You have to move.
Yeah.
If you don't move, you kind of lose the ability to move. And so as I watch some of the seniors navigate the ship, that's what I thought to myself, is like, yo, they look great. And I bet they walk every day. I saw them on the deck, like you say, couples walking together.
And
so there's so many tools that we can use to take ourselves out of that zone. And I'm glad the doc brought up meditation, because I never considered that. What do you say, doc, to people, minorities in America that are anti mental health? A lot of us as Black folks, we be walking around like, I'm all right. I don't need to talk to nobody. I don't need to do nothing. But it's it can be our different one as well.
So there's an interesting thing about that, Rodney, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the other thing we know from the literature is that persons who deny that they're experiencing stress and who report stress who are less likely to report stress are more likely sometimes to have higher blood pressure levels. So we see that in the discrimination literature, for example. People who report that they're experiencing discrimination tend to have lower blood pressure levels than people who report that they're experiencing sort of discrimination. And some of that, we believe, is related to the fact that there's this, sort of internalization and not, sort of accepting and not, sort of interacting with others around that particular issue. And so it is this, it actually hurts your body ultimately by not being able to admit certain things and also seek the help for those things.
Wow, that goes a long way. And Rodney, I know you and I both have been in the company of people who could really use some therapy. Let's be honest about it.
Indeed.
And taking our advice is not necessarily going to be the thing, but maybe coming from you, Dr. Albert, a woman that looks like many of us and sounds like many of us, and telling us the importance of seeking out therapists. I mean, we certainly understood that during the pandemic, the necessity for that, didn't we?
Yeah, so certainly, I'm a cardiologist, and, I'm certainly not a specialist in a mental health specialist. But what I will say is that I know, I've spent a lot of my career studying the relationship between the heart and the brain, and the relationship between stress and the heart. And, for sure, if you're out there and you're experiencing depressed mood or higher levels of anxiety, then you should reach out to medical attention if you need to. And sometimes, reaching out to a friend or having somebody else tell you that you actually need to get help, you should then, sort of accelerate and get help. Sybil and Rodney, I want to talk about a specific thing that, as, for example, African-American women, there's something called a superwoman schema.
Yes.
Where it is a schema that describes this context of, sort of heightened mistreatment and discrimination and maybe even, sort of cultural or form other influences that then get indoctrinated into us as a stress because of our need to have to, sort of for self-preservation and preservation of our communities and so forth, and wanting to take care of others more than we attend to our self-care.
Right.
There's such a schema that's described, and that schema we believe is associated with poorer cardiovascular wellness. And certainly we don't know from a data perspective if it's associated with worsened cardiovascular events. But we know that it is definitely associated with not as good wellness and not as good mental health. And so if you find yourself whether you are from any racial or ethnic background or socioeconomic background, in a context where you're really giving, but not paying attention to your own well-being and your own mental health, and that you're getting stressed because of that and getting depressed because of that, please reach out and get help.
Yeah. Can you talk about the difference, if there is, which is a question we have, between stress and chronic stress? Isn't is there a difference there?
Yeah, there is a difference, so, stress, some stress is good for us, right? It's the kind of stuff that, sometimes gets us motivated to study for exams or do tasks that we're dragging our feet on doing. And, we all fall into that category at some point in our life. But when we talk about chronic stress, especially chronic toxic stress, it's stress that, is happening over prolonged periods of time, without adequate pop-off valves, sort of related to stressors. So for example, stress related to discrimination, stress related to chronic work stress, for example. And we know that the chronic toxic stress is associated with what we call unhealthy brain architecture. So there are actually things that happen in the brain, changes like increased what we call amygdala activity, and some of the things that I was mentioning earlier, like heightened worse levels of inflammation. Inflammation is bad for the body. Levels of inflammation are bad for the body. Some levels are good because they take care of cuts that we get. So we know that this chronic stress, is associated with heart attacks, strokes, at the end of the day, which is different than, just stress in general, that is not associated with unhealthy brain architecture.
So let me just, I'm going to call upon you, doctor, because I've been going through some stress most recently after it came off the ship. Coming home from a graduation celebration Saturday night, I had an accident in which I was trying to avoid a box in the middle of the road. I hit the curb of the median, and I blew out one of my tires. The box hit my second tire, rear tire, and I was like, oh, geez. And I wasn't that far from home. So I was kind of praying to God and just hyperventilating a bit, trying to get home. And then I had some technological issues trying to get a car and my phone not working from off the ship and all these things today. And I just find myself, just having to just kind of just slow myself down. Is that the best way to do it, is to breathe and to try to, I couldn't meditate while I was driving, obviously, a rental car that was very tough to get to without my phone. But all of these things just seem to be adding up. And I don't want to be a statistic and ending up in somebody's emergency room. But is the answer for me to just kind of breathe and try to work my way through it? And then, at the end of the day, when I say my prayers at night, I'm like, please, God, just let me, be able to handle this. And is what I'm doing right? Or does the American Heart Association have suggestions on other ways to handle this without getting a dog? Because I'm not ready for one right now.
Right. So, I'm glad you mentioned because the American Heart Association has actually statements related to stress and health that you can access via the heart.org/stress website for the American Heart Association. But I think first thing is, Sybil, is that I would say that, I'm glad that you are safe and sound with us and that or anyone else got injured. And so the stressful situation and the response to it is going to really depend on the circumstance you find yourself in that moment, right? So some of that flight response is to be able to get you out of a situation like you found yourself in that other night, right? So that part is important for the body to react in a particular way because you need to think quickly and you need to ensure that you're safe and those around you are safe.
Right.
But we also know that the stacking up of acute stressors, like what you were just describing, can result also in, heart attacks and strokes. So, the classic stress literature is one that describes, like let's say football, being a part of an earthquake or a NBA, basketball game, watching that. And that being associated for some people, those things being associated for some people with having heart attacks. And for those persons, they probably were going to have their heart attack anyway, because what the acute stressor did was actually tip them over, related to that pathophysiology of what happens in a heart attack, which is that you get rupture of plaques in the blood vessels. So that's the medical part of it. But your specific question, Sybil, was, sort of how do you manage that? So first of all, you notice, once you're outside of the acute stressful situation, you step back and you say, so how did I handle that situation? Did I handle the acute situation appropriately? And are there additional steps I need to take, for myself and for others next time around, that I'm able to actually manage the circumstance even better? And how do I protect myself, over time from these different acute stressors, sort of stacking up on top of each other to result in a bad health outcome?
Yeah. Rodney?
Absolutely. Doc, here goes. A lot of us have done a lot of damage to our bodies over the years, for whatever reason, whether it be stress or, the million things that happen to you daily. Is stress the key to turning back the clock for a lot of us?
So I don't know the answer to that question, but what I do know is this. This is how I'm going to answer it. Is to say that the other thing that we do when we're stressed is that we we eat poorly, we don't sort of exercise, do physical activity,
and we have a bit of a delay
by not doing those things, not smoking, not sort of eating poorly, etc. Then the answer is yes. Right? Because if we increase our risk factors when we're stressed, by having behavior that is not cognizant with good health and wellness. So that would be my answer to your question.
And Doc, a lot of us, I'm glad you mentioned the sleep part of this, because, a lot of times in our community, it's like hustle, grind, hustle, go do this, work. And we need to take a break. We need to decompress. We need to meditate, and that stuff makes a difference. And I became a big proponent of sleep post stroke, and I will get my sleep, but I'm still not sleeping no 8 hours a night, 7 to 8 hours a night, like you say. I'm way shy of that.
Yeah, and some people need help in.
Yeah, I've been to a sleep clinic, and
yeah, that sleep clinic is like, you've been asleep 1 hour, dog.
Right. Some people, I think one of the things that people don't know about sleep is that you can actually get professional help to help with sleep, right? So many medical centers have programs where you can get cognitive behavioral therapy to help with sleep and the things that go into you not getting enough sleep. So some of the things that go into people not getting enough sleep include not having a standard time every night that they go to bed and a standard time that they wake up in the morning. Making sure that in terms of your caffeine intake, that you limit your caffeine intake per day to no more than 1 to 2 glasses of caffeine. And also not having caffeine after about 2 p.m. in the day. So a lot of people will drink, coffee after they have dinner and so forth. That's a no-no. Also limiting your alcohol intake. These are all things that go into your sleep quality.
We lost the last part
I'm doing all the wrong things.
audio.
I've been drinking to go to sleep.
Doc, we lost the last part of your audio, but I think we have the heart of the question answered there. Before we run out of time, I do want to give you the opportunity, Dr. Michelle Abbott, to share with people one thing that you want to leave with our viewers, or the most important things, if more than one, that you want to leave with viewers as we talk about stress and heart disease.
Yeah. So I think two things, Sybil. So the first is to make sure that you go to the American Heart Association's website, heart.org or heart.org /stress, to learn more information about stress and health. But also, I think the second thing is, if you find yourself depressed, anxious, or overly stressed, please seek help.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And Doctor, I know that you have a very important job. I don't want to say that it's stressful because you seem to carry it all with such aplomb. But how do you deal with stress?
Yeah, so now, how do I deal with stress? So I think making sure that I set aside time to interact with my family is one way that I deal with stress. Another way that I deal with stress is, sort of really making sure that I get in a walk when I'm able to.
Hmm. And activities. I know you like to travel and do things like that. Is that without the stress of running to the airport and getting through TSA and all that kind of stuff? But beyond all of that, finding those activities that we can do without costing us an arm and a leg, and getting out there and walking and reconnecting with our family and friends, I think that goes a very long way.
Yeah, so I think those two are the two most important things, because sometimes, as you mentioned, travel can be.
Very much so. Very much so. Dr. Albert, I know that you have another month in your position as the president of the American Heart Association. Let's look at this as perhaps your farewell address for our audience. Anything that you want to leave with the people as you now move on to the next step as the past president of the American Heart Association?
I would say that heart disease is an important killer of the global population. It's the number one killer globally, and so it's really, really important not to discount any symptoms of, let's say, heart attack or stroke that you might be experiencing. And I would say that if you're experiencing anything like, arm weakness or facial drooping, or you're experiencing any chest pressure or tightness, please seek help. Maybe, Sybil, that's not the response you were looking for.
Mm-hmm. No, we need to be reminded of that.
That may not be what you were looking for in terms of the response here, Sybil. But I think it is not about, sort of Michelle Albert. It is about, sort of making sure that when people get symptoms for things that they know that they should be seeking help for, that they actually seek help.
Yeah, that's really important. It has been an honor to have the opportunity to know you, to work with you on a couple of these projects, and to meet you in person is just everything, because you just have such a warm and loving personality. We appreciate everything that you've done with the American Heart Association. We wish you happy trails from here on out, and invite you to come back anytime you want to, whether it's American Heart related or not.
And thank you for having me on your program again. So
thank you so much. Rodney had some technical problems, so we will get back with him. Here we go. Hey, Rodney. And he's working his technological magic. Rodney, as a man, let me just ask you this. We were asking Dr. Michelle Albert about how she deals with stress. You are a man who helps us. When we come to your shows, we are able to relieve a lot of stress through laughter. How do you relieve yours? How do you find yourself dealing with stress? Besides the obvious with your wife, we come to understand that.
Well, and I'll say this: one of the chief ways for men to know that they're going through stuff, if they're failing to get an erection, because nobody talks about this stuff, but if you haven't had an erection, you probably got some heart issues and some brain issues, because that'll put you in a state of depression as well. But what I do personally, I'm beefing up. I bought a Peloton. I ride my bike. I'm gonna take the doc's lead in terms of meditation. I'm gonna start a meditation regimen. My wife has begun to do that, and that's been working for her. And more than anything, just acknowledging the fact that that you're stressed. That makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I
Acknowledge
just
it.
pivot in one quick second?
Sure.
Pivot in, Doc.
And I knew I had the last word just now when Sybil asked me. But Rodney, there's something you just said that is so critically important about an erection, which is when we think about heart disease and brain disease, especially as it relates to the blood vessels, it is not something that just is only related to the heart and the brain. It's a total body thing. So atherosclerosis is the medical terminology for what results in ultimately you having a heart attack or a stroke that is actually caused by blockage. And the same thing that's happening in the blood vessels of your heart is also can happen in the blood vessels of your brain, can happen in your blood vessels that go to your kidney, go to your penis, etc. So without actually knowing that, perhaps, Rodney, you highlighted an important issue is difficulty with having an erection. It could signal that you're having problems with the blood vessels that give blood to that part of your body, which means that it could be the same thing that's happening in your heart or to your brain.
And if I may, Rodney, I can just encourage you to go to my Instagram page, and Yolanda has Yogi's Jewels, which gives you daily inspiration as well as meditation, and encourages people to breathe and to meditate and to become an easier person to deal with. Thank you both. Thank you all for joining us. Go to heart.org if you have more questions. Rodney, how can people find you?
I'm easy to find. RodneyPerry.com is the website. Rodney Perry Live on all social media. Thank you, Sybil. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening and breathe.